Chapter 2. Her father's sleeping room smelled like sickness. Jerutha helped him up to bathe often, and Isika changed the sheets under him daily, but the odor persisted, and Isika hated being in the room more every day. The light hurt her father's eyes, so the curtains were pulled tight over the windows, and Isika could barely see him as she walked in. As her eyes adjusted, she saw him sitting up on his mat, his legs crossed and tucked under him, his eyes closed. She recognized his praying posture, so she waited for him to acknowledge her. Finally, he looked up. "Isika, did you get the wood?" he asked. His eyes were shadows in his face. She couldn't see into them at all. "Yes, father," she said. She found that her hands were shaking, and she grabbed the right one with the left to make them still. "I called you in here." He paused and coughed. "Because today I want you to make the offering at the temple." "Why? That's Ben's job," Isika said before she thought, then flinched, knowing her father would be angry. He didn't move toward her, though, only looked at her. She couldn't see his expression. "Go now. Don't come back until the noon meal." He bowed his head and returned his prayers. Isika felt frustration burning through her. Her life was a series of commands without explanation, rules without the ability to understand. She was always confused and struggling with the way workers did things, and why. Why was their house tired, old, and sad? Why did her father refuse things that helped with the work, like buying wood? Why did they wear dark colors, and why weren't they allowed to bring flowers into the house or climb trees? The answers she got when she got answers were unsatisfying. She ached from wanting to speak, to say all the words that were silently building up inside her. But she knew by now that speaking would mean a burning cheek and a bruise the next day. "Yes, father," she said. She bent her head and turned to go. Her feet dragged in the dust as she walked to the temple. Isika had never liked doing temple work. Beniyim didn't like it either. But he didn't have a choice. Nirloth, their father, had decided that Ben would be the one to become the village priest when he died. Isika doubted that the villagers would ever allow a foreigner to become their priest, but still Beniyim did the temple duties day after day. It seemed to Isika's eyes that her brother accepted everything that happened with silence. He never spoke out the way she did. She couldn't tell what he truly thought about anything. It was almost as though he could button himself up inside his skin, shrink into himself, so that nothing of his true character was visible. Isika sometimes thought that she would love him more if she actually knew who he was. They were very different. Isika lived with more risk, unable to hold back her thoughts unless she clamped down on herself hard. As a result, it wasn't strange for Isika to be in bed, with a cold cloth over her face after her father struck her. The temple of the four goddesses was the one bright point in the worker landscape. Their village and the surrounding plains were flat and dry, with scrubby bushes, the losh forests, and a few yuchi trees that didn't add much color, with their gray, washed-out trunks and dull leaves. And workers didn't like to use too many colors because it was said that the goddesses were jealous of bright things. Their temple, in contrast, was dazzling, painted red with gold accents on all its square corners, a large red cube that rose suddenly out of the brown dust. Isika went in quickly and felt the darkness envelop her as she left the burning sunshine. The air was old with incense and cool, despite the small sacred fire that was always kept burning. The stones were smooth beneath her feet. She walked toward the terrifying statues and picked up the bells, ringing them to wake the four goddesses. She began to light the cubes of incense, chanting the words for the morning offering as she did so. "Power, fate, independence, wealth, 4 sisters, 4 realms, I bow to you. I bow to you, power, for you hold everything in sway. I bow to you, fate, for you have written the end. I bow to you, independence, for you hold up our heads. I bow to you, wealth, for you feed the bellies of men. She said the words quickly, and as she chanted, she frowned, the familiar anger rising in her. Isika's mother had died during the famine of the deaf ears, 3 years after they had arrived in the village. There had been a drought for 3 long years, with no rain falling on the earth to beat back the terrible dust or allow the crops to grow. By the 3rd year, the workers were starving, and they offered more children over during that time than they had sent out in 100 years. The boat makers frantically hammered together the tiny boats that the villagers used to send their children out to the sea, where they died in the waves as an offering for the goddesses. Despite the children they received that year, the goddesses hadn't heard the workers. They turned deaf ears. Many more children starved. The goddesses even turned their backs when Nirloth decided that Isika's younger sister Arya needed to be given over. Arya was nearly 8 years old, far too old to be sent out. But Ibba, 3 years old and the right age for the sacrifice, was their father's favorite, and he refused to give her over. They sent Arya out in the little boat. Isika could see her face to this day, quiet, asleep after the offering tea that sent the children to sleep, mercifully, so they didn't have to be awake for the moment they were pushed out on the sea to die at the goddess's hands. Isika still remembered the dread in her stomach, the prickling all along her arms and legs that meant something was terribly, horribly wrong. Paralyzing fear had surged over her, and though she wanted to change something, anything, she was helpless. She had no power or ability to change the world or even Nirloth's mind. Isika's mother, Amani, went into labor that very night, and baby Kital was born. Amani lived for only 2 more weeks. She died of grief, Isika knew. Losing Arya and the wrongness of her death took their mother from them. Even all her other children, even her new baby, weren't enough to make up for her sorrow, to keep her with them. Isika hadn't been able to do anything about that either. She chanted the words again, thinking of her mother in bed in those last days, how small she had become, shrunken and frail as she refused to eat. She gave Kital, the little brown baby she had just birthed, to 10-year-old Isika, and then she gave up her life and floated away. Kital became Isika's truest love, even as he wore the life straight out of her. Isika remembered the wild predictions of the villagers before Kital's birth. Kital was the son of Nirloth and Amani, and no one in the village had ever seen the offspring of a black person and a white person. The egg seller had gone far enough to suggest that he would be striped like a cat. But Kital came out a lovely soft brown, and then Isika stopped going to school, staying home to watch the baby. She looked on with pride as his scrawny little body became a decently meaty body. Not fat, never fat, as the famine lessened. Too late to save Arya or her mother. Isika walked with Beniyim and baby Kital over the endless brown fields of worker land, trying to tire her horrible grief right out of her body. When Kital got older, he toddled around in the trees and went with Isika to gather sticks in the morning. He made everything better, though it had seemed like things would never be okay again. Isika hadn't known how she could ever survive the loss of her mother, who had been the sun in the morning. She made everything bright, even on the dullest day when nothing else penetrated the thick haze of the sky. Amani had helped Isika to understand the people of the worker village, and why they looked at the little family with suspicion. "They are afraid of what they don't understand," she told Isika. "And they don't understand what they have not experienced, because they haven't ever tried. I know it is hard, but you need to learn from the way it makes you feel. Learn to live without fear." Isika told Kital the same thing later. Mama's mother always told her this when she was a little girl. "Fear is the thing that grips the heart and ties the limbs. Live without it, and you can truly love. She finished the chanting in the temple, the words still echoing in the smoky, incense-scented air. Power, fate, independence, wealth. The four goddesses they were taught to fear. No one questioned them and their cruel demands. Before Arya was sent out, Amani had been mostly happy in the worker village. She had her small kitchen garden. She coaxed flowers from the earth where no flowers had grown before, though she was never allowed to gather them and bring them into the house. But Amani quailed before the goddesses. She didn't like to go to the temple, one of the few things she and Isika's father argued about before Arya and the sending. She remained at the doorstep to the temple, her head bowed. "These are not the beliefs of my people," she told Nirlath, pleading with him when he insisted she come in. "You can't even tell me who your people are," he replied. "You don't know where you came from. And you're here now. The people notice you and wonder who this priest has taken for his wife, that she refuses to enter the temple." He had been right about that. Isika placed the bell back into its alcove and pulled the broom from the space behind the altar, sweeping the ashes into a neat pile, then slowly cleaning the interior of the temple where the feet of so many people trod each week, looking for reasons for their failures and pain. "More, more," the goddesses cried. "More worship, more sacrifice." Isika felt their hunger and the stones under her feet. The blame for the workers' pain fell squarely on themselves. Isika shuddered and left the temple with relief. She started across the field that led to the house, and just as she did so, the wailing began.